Hello everyone, welcome back to the Artless Dialogue. It's me and Ash as always, and welcome to the weekly roundup. So Ash, how are you doing?
I'm good. Saud, yourself?
Yeah, I'm good. It's been a while since our last episode, but
It has.
life just gets in the way sometimes, so we're back.
It does, and I'm in my lovely new location where I can get to see the Campsies, which are the lovely hills in Scotland.
Oh,
So lots of natural light as well. So I'm
we can
I'm
see
enjoying the new location.
some books and Lego in the background as well. So
Yeah, two of my hobbies: reading and Lego.
I should put some posters up around here
You
somewhere
should,
as
you
well.
should, you should. It's a kind of it's the done thing now, isn't it, to have a library of books behind you, and they've all got to be really cool books. No, I've got mainly books about risk management, strategy, and personal development type stuff.
That's pretty cool. And
Um,
they're so far away, so I can't read the headings. So
you can't read the
even
headlines, so
if
just
you're
pretend.
joking,
Yeah,
yeah.
pretend they're impressive. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what's on your mind? Anything interesting you've heard or read in the world of business recently?
Yeah, lots of stuff, but probably the one that kind of stuck in my head, just because we've been talking about it recently, and it's in the news, and it was a meeting that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were having with a number of CEOs on AI and things like Chat GPT. So obviously, it's kind of prevalent everywhere, and regulators don't really know how to deal with it. Universities don't really know how to deal with it. Organizations are kind of grappling with, is it a really useful resource that we should, use, or actually is it a big concern for us? And everyone's kind of in that weird space. And so the purpose behind this meeting really was for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to effectively ask quite open questions with these CEOs. I think it was Microsoft, OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT, and Google, and a couple other, all the sort of big tech firms.
Yeah.
And what they were really trying to ask here was, what are those organizations doing to sort of police, monitor, manage things like ChatGPT, etc.
Hmm.
And also they're trying to sort of front run what policy changes might come in, or what policies might come in to sort of enforce and regulate some of this, just for that very reason, because different areas are treating it very differently, and it causes all sorts of kind of concerns for them.
Yeah.
And within that, and the someone within the sort of US government have created this lovely document. We'll have to share the link to it. Risk management framework before, and it's like, it's about a 50-60 page document, but it starts introducing new language which I've never read before, and it calls it socio-technical sort of risk.
Okay.
And it basically obviously means technical, straightforward technical, because it's lots of technology involved, and socio because of social, environmental,
Yeah.
because obviously a lot of the AI tooling is learning from what's around it. The internet, basically, the data that's out there, which is highly driven by social norms. It's influenced by society in different cultures, different societies. A lot of the biases are built in with different societies and cultures and how they feel towards each other.
Hmm.
So an AI in the States will be very different to an AI in China or something. So they're all kind of built very differently, because they learn from what's around them. And so this paper was quite interesting, because it kind of split the risks into three things, which was, it's harm to people,
Yeah.
harm to organization, and harm to ecosystems. And I thought it was such a clever way of doing it, because if you think about it, the harm to people basically here is, so imagine today, we've got credit risk and we've got underwriters, and if you think about a lot of insurance companies, a lot of banks, etc., it's a heavily resourced part of the sort of financial industry, because it requires sometimes subjective overlay over data driven decisions. So, for example, you go apply for a credit card or a mortgage, you need to eventually talk to someone from a mortgage perspective. You'll need to go to an underwriter, et cetera, et cetera. Now, they're kind of saying, well, actually, a lot of those steps, these days, AI can replicate that, and ChatGPT can certainly do that faster, quicker, better. However, it'll build in biases and things like, for example, if you know for a fact that certain postcodes in the UK are highly likely to fail, or even the masses of data available to this now says, well, actually, the percentage of that population that goes to university, therefore the chances of them earning X amount of salary are Y.
Mm.
So suddenly these tools can access a huge mass of data, and all the biases that come with that suddenly get built in.
Mm.
And so the human impact is, well, actually, it becomes unfair, and those who have the least suddenly get treated even more badly as a result. So that's kind
Yeah.
of the human bit, which I thought was quite interesting.
Well, while
Go on,
humans
sorry,
can
go.
while humans can actually read each application or each individual in detail and actually analyze that properly, the software would not be able to do that as well. And w- just as you said, so yeah, I think
Yeah, and it's also kind of like, obviously, if you've got a bias, you might be self-aware enough to go, that's a bias playing in, so I'm going to override the bias.
yeah,
But as an AI, especially things like Chat GPT, I mean, the whole point of it is it goes out and it amasses tons of data,
yeah,
and then it learns from that data and plays it back. And if all that data tells you that those individuals in that particular area are likely to achieve the maximum salary band, then you're going to go, well, actually, we're not going to give you a mortgage, even if they may be a highly paid individual today, because it kind of ignores the data and it says, well, the stats say X.
hmm,
So I thought was interesting. The harm to the organization, again, we're starting to kind of see some of this come through already. So a lot of in the engineering industry, and by engineer I mean software engineers,
definitely,
they are already kind of accessing things like Chat GPT to help write with coding.
hmm,
And some of the coding, a bit like building a house, the boring bit is the foundations,
yeah,
but that's really critical. Same with coding, there's tons of stuff that actually is really kind of time consuming, but Chat GPT accelerates that for you. So you can say, I want some base code that does X, Y, and Z, and Chat GPT produces that for you. But obviously, the risk is, if you don't check that line by line by line, you've just introduced something, a backdoor potentially into your organization, or all sorts of, issues, errors, flaws, or even intentional, malicious sort of sleeper sort of issues in there.
yeah. That's exactly what I was thinking as well. Because if you're using software, you're doing two things. One, you're trusting in that software which you maybe don't understand completely to send you the
Yeah,
right stuff, and secondly, so as you said, it could be writing backdoors into the software, or the third part is corporate espionage, in the sense
yeah,
that the software or the server, I'm not saying the organization would be doing that, but other hackers could get into ChatGPT or a similar organization and see, okay, someone from company X or bank X asked for this stuff. That means they're working on these kind of projects, or this is a patent they want to get out, or
yeah,
something like that. So I
yeah,
think security is going to be very important, and as you mentioned before, regulation and security and how people use it and what they can actually do with it. I think that's very important, and
yeah.
I think that makes the whole difference in terms of protecting employees, personal data, consumers, and the organizations itself. Um,
Yeah.
Another
And
thing, yeah,
sorry, I would say just on your point on data, because it's spot on. And you kind of see at the moment, because there's no real kind of rules around this, people in organizations are using Chat GPT to do all sorts of things. Like, for example, going, oh, I need to write a regulatory paper that's going to be 20 pages long. Right. It's going to bore me to death. So I'll tell you what, I'll go and ask Chat GPT to write the paper for me, and then I'll do the final 20% refinement.
yeah,
But you've just now shared personal information with ChatGPT, including some of the challenges you're facing. You might have input all sorts of information to, and that in theory has gone into the public domain. And so if you can kind of reverse engineer that and store down the requests into ChatGPT, you can find out a lot of information by doing that.
yeah.
So you're quite right about data as the other kind of key risk to this.
And then at the end of the day, how comfortable are you with one uh, AI solution controlling or being a platform for all of this?
Yeah.
So it's not a government, it's not an international non-profit or something like that. It's just
Yeah.
one organization or one software. And I think it's well, when it comes to everything, when it comes to humans, there are chances of mistakes.
Yeah.
And I think until the regulation catches up in a good way and people within organizations know the pros, cons, risks of using this kind of software, it shouldn't be used on such a mass scale for professional activities or even personal, important, sensitive data.
Yeah.
So I think people are, well, my personal opinion is that people are diving in, which is a good thing. It will promote, push regulators, it will improve the technology and the output, but it's also something to think about, and it's also risky, and how you manage what questions you ask, what output you use, and how you use it.
Yeah. No, I would completely agree. And I think just on that, it's a bit like a wagon that's out of control rolling down this hill. It's momentum has been built, and so people are now kind of chasing after it rather than leading it and controlling it. So it has already got the momentum. The other bit, and again, for listeners to be wary of, fraud and phishing attacks. People are probably familiar with those kind of things now, and I get it. Every other day there's an email, asking me to do this or I do that. Now some of them are quite kind of smart. Some of them are hilarious because it'll be like instead of UPS it'll be IPS. Oh, we have a parcel for you. Click here and pay a deposit. But with ChatGPT, you can now create really intelligent looking emails
Hmm.
that sound very realistic
Yeah.
because ChatGPT, just like it can access the internet, it can access all of the comms and messages that have gone out by certain financial institutions. So it can not only replicate the words, replicates the tone, replicates the font. All sorts. You've seen the AI picture type, apps that draw
Oh,
all sorts of
very scary.
pictures. Yeah, very scary, but also cool. But you kind of go, right, well, you could just replicate pretty much anything now.
Hmm.
And they were then talking about the evolution of Chat GPT, which is it's all kind of text and words at the moment, but the evolution of that into voice and then ultimately into images, where just like there's lots of text out there, there's lots of audio recordings. So
Yeah.
me and you, for example, there's lots of examples of us saying plenty of words out there. So if you were an AI, you could take all of those words and go, right, I've now got enough of vocabulary to replicate me and you. So we can then sit there next, in a couple of months' time and just go, right, was a lovely little podcast and
I
it
actually
replicates your voice.
I actually listened to an AI podcast. So
Yeah,
the people on both sides were real people, real
yeah,
podcasters,
yeah.
but that whole podcast, the voice, the video was AI generated. I saw the
Crazy.
44-minute podcast, and it wasn't the best, but it was like it
No,
was
it's up.
fine.
Yeah, and that's first view. So, but you kind of go, you can see the evolution then of how, if you wanted to use that for kind of malicious gain and phishing, and there was a recent one in the news about a customer of a bank, a UK bank, where the fraudster had sort of imitated the head of fraud for that bank
Okay.
and phoned the customer and basically said, "Oh, you've had some dodgy dealings on your account. We need you to transfer the money." They'd then given him a phone number. It sounded like you phoned the bank. Everything was validated. The customer trusted it, transferred the money, and then found out it was all false.
Oh wow.
Um, Now, that takes resource by someone to do that today, but in the future, you could just do that en masse because it's all technology and software. So yeah. So I guess summing up, it's another new technology, just like all the new technologies that seem to be out there at the moment. And people are kind of finding their feet a little bit on this. So I think we should probably do an episode of a risk assessment of AI and Chat GPT, because I imagine certainly our banking listeners will be quite interested in what some of those thoughts would be.
We could do a deeper dive onto that.
We definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Right. What's caught your eye this week?
So this week I was following the economy quite closely, the UK economy quite specifically, and according to what I've read and what I feel, it seems quite optimistic. So there was this survey conducted by the Institute of Directors. What they do is basically they go around to directors at different companies and ask them questions about the economy, how business is doing, how profitable do you think will you be in the next year, how much hiring are you doing, and business confidence among this group of people has risen for the past 5 months consecutively. And right now, business confidence is at, according to the Institute of Directors, business confidence is at a level it was at before the Russia-Ukraine crisis. So, that's a good sign of improvement in the economy, at least from a business perspective and a corporate perspective. So I started doing a bit more digging in, and I found an article by the Financial Times which said that UK's economy, UK's GDP, according to the GDP index, is higher than it was pre-pandemic. So it's higher than it was in 2019. So these are all pretty good and optimistic signs for the economy going forward, and us getting out of the recession if we were ever in it. It's
Yeah.
still, I think, confusing, like we don't know. But
Yeah.
so there are some things I was thinking about. Now, add that to the fact that prices have been rising for
Hmm.
groceries, for rents, for
Yeah.
bills and
Well,
everything.
inflation's been through the roof, hasn't it? So yeah.
Yeah, and there are expectations that this year we'll hit the peak
Hmm.
if we haven't already. So about 70% people say that if we haven't already hit the peak of inflation, we
Yeah.
will hit it sometime this year, and it's only 30% that say it'll be next year. So it's optimistic, and I've around me, all the news I've been reading and the corporate environment, I've not seen any signs of a recession going forward, any conservative or risk mitigation steps which could be quite significant. I think that corporations are also moving towards increasing investment, increasing hiring, and finally stepping out. Uh, so I think that was something interesting I read, and something to put people's hopes up and become more optimistic again. So I thought it was worth mentioning. I'd also like to ask, what have you seen around yourself, and what are your views on this? Do you think that we're moving to a better place finally after 3 years of COVID and everything else?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's. Do you know what? It's. I'm trying to think back because I started my sort of banking career in 2007.
Yeah,
When we had the first big credit crunch, and it feels like we've
just
been sort
dove
of.
in.
Oh yeah, just dove straight in. I thought I'd start at the bottom and then just literally stay there. Um, so so there's always been something, and there's always been ups and downs, and I think it's like most economists will tell you there's always a cycle, and the cycle goes up and down, and inflation kind of goes up and then finds its way down again. And as much as inflation has been higher than it's been in a long time, the economists have always kind of stayed quite positive because I think they thought the impact of COVID was going to be materially worse than it was,
Yeah,
and everyone provision for it to be materially worse than it was. If you look back to sort of 2019 and 2020 and a lot of the sort of results for most of the banks, they were all provisioning a ton of money, waiting for the wave to crash over them because there was this expectation that it would come at some point,
mm,
and that the inflation wasn't sustainable. That would have an impact on other things like spend and all this sort of stuff. And I don't know if it's just good luck that all of the sort of money that was retained during people not spending over the 2 years, because I think there's something like the savings amount in the UK alone went up by something like six billion or something,
oh,
because people were not going restaurants, they're not going holiday,
yeah.
and then they've started spending that money in the years since then.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, and this is the danger. When I talk to my economist colleagues, they're kind of saying it's so difficult, and a bit like the weather. Every time they say something, someone says, "Oh, well, you got it wrong again," and you're like, "Yeah, but that's because there's about 1,000,001 variables, a lot of which they can't control." And so you kind of try and apply logic to it, but
mm,
we've never had a COVID type situation before.
yeah,
And we've never had a COVID situation the same time as a material recession or a borderline recession for a long period of time. And at the same time, we've never had inflation so high.
mm,
And so I don't know if all of those have kind of cancelled themselves out to some kind of weird magic mathematic rule, and actually we've come out far better than we thought we would.
Yeah.
And the country thought it was going to be in material debt, and although it still is, it's not as bad as they thought it would be. And actually, as you saw in some of the budgets, they this year they had more money to spend than they thought they did, and they thought they were going to kind of go, right, we're going to be in some serious trouble, and it's going to be another 10 years of tightening the belts and not spending the money. But actually, they realized they had more budget than they thought they did. So I don't know. So yeah, I think there's definitely optimism, and there's definitely kind of the inflation sort of rises are running out of steam. So I think they'll level off. The Bank of England have already kind of said they're leveling off rate rises, and that'll kind of stay. I think, there's some talk about the housing market potentially being impacted. But then you hear that all the time again.
Yeah. It's hard to sort out the noise.
Yeah, and yet you talk to people who are buying houses in certain areas, and they're like, I don't see that. I don't see the price drop because, certainly in the UK, it's a finite, plot of land. Trying to find housing in certain big cities is difficult, and therefore any house that comes up for sale, unfortunately, it's a buyer's market, seller's market. So you're always, you're always kind of have more demand than you have properties. So yeah, it's tricky. I think the short answer is much better than I think people anticipated.
Yep.
But we've still got a year or two rocky period before we're back to the way we were pre-COVID, which was we were on a roll. We were kind of multiple quarters of positive GDP growth, and we were more complaining about the lack of sustainable GDP growth to the double digits type numbers. So I think we're a while away from there.
Yeah, and I think another point to think about is that in one of our last episodes, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about a couple of banks failing, and I'm sure we've all heard that in the news as well. So there were talks and articles on, okay, now this is going to lead to more banks failing and recession and 2008 crisis again, and we're not going to get out of this for a long time. But it just stopped. It went away. I guess it wasn't as bad as everyone was thinking initially, except for those banks and their customers, but
of course
on a larger scale. So that's a good sign that everyone else was stable, had the risk in strategies in place, and had the money and everything. So that combined with everything else, I think we're starting to see going back to normal, and so. That's something.
No, well, you hit it first. If it goes horribly wrong, Saud, then it's on you.
Well, I'm not an economist, so that's fine.
Yeah, neither am I. That's a great place to be, where you can just give an uninformed opinion. That's brilliant.
If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And if you want similar content, check out our other videos.